The cold forest floor was the only home she had left. Maeva Cross was dying, her body ravaged by a disease with no cure. She was using her last ounce of strength not to save herself, but to free a trapped wolf cub from a silver snare. Her hands were bleeding, her vision fading. She didn't know the cub was the heir to the entire kingdom, nor did she realize its father, the ruthless Alpha King, Jax Stormrider, was mere seconds away and had just found her covered in his son's blood. The forest floor of the Blackwood Ridge was an unforgiving bed. Maeva Cross knew this better than anyone. Each sharp pine needle that pricked her threadbare tunic was a reminder of her exile, and each rattling cough that tore through her chest was a reminder of her approaching death. The silver blight, as the healers in her cast-out village called it, was a slow, insidious wasting disease that clung to the weak, the non-shifters, the humans who lived on the fringes of the great packlands. It thinned, the blood hollowed the cheeks and stole the breath. At 23, Maeva looked a decade older, a wraith haunting the forbidden territory of the Alpha King. She was here for a final desperate gamble, the moon petal blossom. A flower fabled to bloom only in the deepest, most dangerous part of the ridge, rumored to be a panacea for all shifter ailments. While she was human, she hoped its magic might be enough. It was a fool's errand, and she knew it. The ridge was the private hunting ground of Jax Stormrider, a king known for his brutal enforcement of borders. A sharp, panicked yelp cut through the fog of her pain. It wasn't a deer or a rabbit. It was a canine cry, high-pitched, filled with terror. It was a sound Maeva understood in her very bones. The sound of something small, terrified, and in agony. Against all reason, she moved toward it. Her tattered boots crackled over dry leaves as she pushed through a curtain of ancient weeping spruce. She found it in a small clearing. It was a wolf cub, no more than a few months old, its pelt a striking, luminous silver gray. It was beautiful, and it was trapped. A poacher's snare, thick and cruel, had snapped shut around its front paw. But this was no ordinary wire trap. This was silver. Woven strands of pure toxic silver gleamed in the dim light, and the metal was already doing its work. The flesh around the cub's leg was blackened. The fur singed away. The scent of ozone and burning meat filled the air. The cub thrashed, growing weaker. It was poisoning itself, dying. Maeva's illness, weakened body, screamed at her. Silver was a danger to all, but to the sick it was a death sentence. Just being near it made her lungs tighten, her vision swim. But as she looked at the small creature, its eyes frantic and terrified gold, she saw her own desperation mirrored. "Hush, little one. Hush!" she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. She knew she didn't have the strength. The silver blight was at its peak. She'd been coughing blood all morning, just to touch the silver to exert this much energy. It would be the end. She was trying to save a life, and here she was, about to throw her own away for a wild animal. She didn't care. She couldn't watch it die. Maeva fell to her knees, the mud cold and wet against her skin. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the cub. "This will hurt." She gripped the steel-toothed jaws of the trap. The silver was cold, a biting, unnatural cold that seemed to leach the heat from her very marrow. She ignored the immediate searing pain as the metal's toxic purity burned her palms. She slid her fingers, already bloody, inside the mechanism to pry it open. The cub snapped at her, its tiny teeth grazing her wrist, but she didn't flinch. "I know," she gasped, her lungs on fire. "I know." She poured every last fragmented piece of her life force into her arms, her muscles atrophied and weak, screaming. Black spots danced in her vision. She tasted copper in her throat. With a final agonized groan, she pulled. Clang! The metal jaws sprang open. The cub scrambled backward, whimpering, and collapsed onto its side, its chest heaving. It was alive. Maeva collapsed forward, her strength gone. She lay on her side, her hands a ruined, bloody mess. The silver's poison, combined with the final exertion, had shattered her last reserves. A violent, racking cough seized her. She rolled onto her back, gasping. and saw the dark arterial red that now stained her lips and the front of her tunic. The bleeding wasn't just from her hands. It was internal. The silver blight had won. A strange peace settled over her. The air was crisp. The cub was still breathing. It was not a bad way to die. That's when the forest went silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. A heavy, oppressive stillness descended so absolute it was louder than any sound. Then a thud. The sound of a massive weight landing on soft earth. Another thud. Thud. A shadow fell over her, so large it blocked out the sliver of sky. Maeva didn't have the strength to turn her head, but she could smell him. Ozone fresh pine and an ancient terrifying power. She heard a low rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate in her teeth. From the corner of her fading vision she saw a boot. Not a boot, but a massive black paw, its claws the size of daggers, planted mere inches from her face. The claws retracted, and in a ripple of impossible magical transformation, a man stood where the wolf had been. He was a giant, dressed in dark leathers and furs, but his face was carved from hard angles, his jaw severe, his brow heavy. It was his eyes that held her. They were not human. They were the color of burning gold, and they were fixed on her with an expression of pure, unfiltered fury. He stalked past her, ignoring her, and knelt beside the whimpering silver cub. His huge, calloused hand was surprisingly gentle as he ran it over the cub's fur. Finn, his voice was low gravel, a controlled earthquake. The king turned. He finally looked at her, the dying woman on the forest floor. He took in the scene. His son, his heir poisoned by silver, the open trap. And this filth, a human covered in blood. His son's blood. His golden eyes narrowed to slits. Alpha King Jack Storm Rider reached a devastatingly wrong and perfectly logical conclusion. You, he snarled the single word, a promise of death. What have you done, Jax? Alpha King of the 3 continental packs and ruler of the Fortitude Valley, lived by a simple code: protect his blood, protect his land. The woman lying in the mud had violated both. His rage was a physical thing, a black fire that burned the air around him. He scented the scene in a sharp professional inhale. The scents were a confusing, maddening tangle, the bitter poison of silver, the weakness of human illness, the musky terror of the rogue poachers who had set this trap, and most prominently, the sharp iron scent of his son's blood, which was coating this woman's hands and staining her mouth. He took a step toward her, his shadow swallowing her whole. He would tear her throat out himself. It was the only fitting justice. Maeva's vision was a blurry tunnel. All she could see were those burning golden eyes, a sun of pure hatred descending on her. She tried to speak, to say, "I saved him," but all that came out was a wet, bloody cough that splattered the leaves by his boot. A poacher, Jax growled, savoring the word before the execution. A human dog who dares to put her hands on the Valyrius heir. He was about to lunge when a small, weak sound stopped him. A whine. Finn, his son, had crawled from his spot. He was dragging his injured leg, but he ignored his father and moved with painful effort toward Maeva. The tiny cub nudged its nose against her ruined, bloody hand. When she didn't respond, it whimpered again, a sound of profound distress, and licked the blood from her fingers. Jack Storm Rider froze. His son Ash was not a trusting cub. He was the heir carrying the royal alpha gene. He was aloof, proud, and trusted no one but Jax and his beta Wraith Wolfthorn. He never ever showed affection to strangers, and now he was trying to comfort the woman Jax was about to execute. This didn't add up. The Alpha King's fury, once a burning flame, now became a cloud of confusing smoke. He forced his instincts to heal, replacing his rage with cold, sharp observation. He scented the air again, slowly this time, dissecting the layers. He smelled the silver on the trap. He smelled the same silver burned into Maeva's palms. He smelled the blood on her hands. It was hers. The blood on her mouth, also hers. The only blood of his son's was a small smear on her wrist where the cub had snapped at her. He looked at the snare. It was designed for a full-grown wolf but laced with enough silver to kill an entire pack. He looked at her hands. The wounds were defensive. No, not defensive. They were sacrificial. He looked at her. Truly looked at her. Her emaciated frame, the hollow gray-tinted cheeks. The unmistakable scent of the silver blight, a human disease he despised for its weakness. She was dying. She had been dying before she touched the silver, and she had touched it anyway to free his son. The Alpha King reeled, his entire worldview tilting on its axis. He had been so sure. The rage vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp, and entirely unfamiliar emotion. Shame. He had almost murdered his son's savior. Rafe, he bellowed, shaking the trees. A second later, 3 massive wolves burst into the clearing. They shifted in seamless practice motions, emerging as 3 broad-shouldered men in dark tactical gear. The one in the lead, Rafe Wolfthorn, had a hard face and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. He was Jax's beta, his oldest friend. My King Rafe said, his eyes immediately finding the cub. Ash is he. He's alive. Jax cut him off, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. The trap was silver-laced. Rafe's face went white. He looked from the trap to Maeva, who was now unconscious, her breathing terrifyingly shallow. The woman? Is she the poacher? Jax knelt. He ignored Rafe, ignored his guards. He looked at the frail, bloody woman who had just traded her last breath for his son. He felt a primal, ancient magic settle in his chest. A life debt. The most sacred and unbreakable bond in their world. No, Jax said, his voice quiet. He gently, almost reverently, scooped the whimpering cub into one arm. Ash immediately buried his face in his father's chest. With his other hand, Jax pointed at Maeva. She is the one who saved him. Rafe Wolfthorn's jaw went slack. This was the only time in 20 years he had ever seen his beta truly speechless. She is human, Jax, and she's sick. She's dying. Jax corrected him, his voice like iron. Because she used her last strength to free my son from a trap that we failed to find. She touched pure silver for him. He turned to his guards. You two find the poacher's trail. I want their heads by moonrise. The guards nodded and vanished back into the woods. Jax looked at Rafe. Get her to the healers, Rafe asked, moving to lift Maeva. No, Jax said, his gaze distant and calculating. To the keep. Rafe paused, Maeva's frail weight already in his arms. Jax, the council, the elders, they'll never allow a human, a sick human, into the Valyrius keep. She is not a human! Jax snarled, his golden eyes flashing. She is mine. She is under my protection. The life debt is owed, and it will be paid. He began the long walk back to the fortress, his heir safe in one arm. She will not die, Rafe. I forbid it. Rafe stared at his alphas retreating back, then at the unconscious woman in his arms. He had a feeling the poachers were about to become the least of the Alpha King's problems. Maeva drifted in and out of consciousness. Her world was a swirl of confusing, disjointed sensations, the jarring rhythm of being carried, the scent of leather and rain, the warmth of a blazing fire, the abrasive feel of a rough spun blanket being pulled away, replaced by something impossibly soft. When she finally opened her eyes, the world she saw was one she didn't recognize. She was not in her drafty hovel. She was not on the cold forest floor. She was in a bed so large it could have slept her entire family. The sheets were black silk, and the fur-lined duvet that covered her was heavy and warm. A massive carved stone fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting a warm golden light over the room. The walls were hung with ancient-looking tapestries, depicting great wolf battles. This was a room of power. This was a room in the Valyrius keep. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through her groggy haze. She tried to sit up, but her body felt like lead. Her hands. She looked at them. They were no longer bloody. They were swathed in clean white bandages, and a soothing herbal scent rose from them. I would not recommend moving, a voice said, dry like old parchment. Maeva turned her head. An old woman sat in a high-backed chair by the fire, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. She was severe, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes the color of a winter sky. Where Maeva rasped her throat raw. "You are in the Alpha King's personal wing," the woman said, not looking up. "I am Lila Hale, the pack healer, and you, girl, are a medical impossibility." "The cub," Maeva's voice cracked. "Is he—" "The young heir is fine," Lila Hale said, a note of begrudging respect in her voice. "Thanks to you, the silver poison was minimal. His father's blood is strong. Your hands, however, were another story. The silver burned deep." Lila Hale continued standing and walking to the bed with a small porcelain cup. "Drink." "What is it?" Maeva asked, her voice tight with suspicion. "Broth laced with wolf's bane sun blossom and heart's tongue fern," Lila Hale replied. "It won't cure your silver blight, but it will keep you anchored to this world for a few more days." Maeva drank. The liquid was hot and powerful, and she felt a jolt of energy. A false warmth spread through her limbs. "Why?" Maeva asked, her mind clearing. "Why am I here? I'm human." "You are a complication," Lila Hale stated, taking the cup back. "The Alpha King owes you a life debt, a fact that has the entire council in an uproar. He has invested in your recovery." The heavy oak door of the chamber opened with a solid thud, and the room's temperature seemed to drop. Alpha King Jack Stormrider entered. He was even more terrifying indoors. In the forest he had been a force of nature. Here in his own domain he was a god. He had shed his hunting leathers for a simple black tunic and trousers that did nothing to hide the brutal, corded muscle beneath. His black hair was damp, as if from a shower, and his golden eyes were fixed on Maeva. "Lila Hale, leave us," he commanded. The healer bowed her head. "My king," she murmured. She gathered her supplies and left, closing the heavy door behind her. The silence that remained was deafening. Jack Stormrider didn't speak. He paced the perimeter of the room, hands clasped behind his back. He was a predator marking his territory, studying the strange new presence that had appeared within it. Maeva Cross refused to cower. She had stared death in the face for months. She wouldn't be intimidated by a man, even if he was a king. Pushing herself up on her elbows, the silk sheets pooled around her waist. She spoke, her voice gaining strength from the broth. "You're wondering who I am," she said. He stopped pacing. "I'm not," he replied, his voice deep and quiet. "I know who you are. You're Maeva Cross, 23, an outcast from the Ridgewood human settlement. Your family died of the fever 5 years ago. You've been dying from the silver blight for 6 months. You have no pack, no protection, and no one. You are, for all intents and purposes, a ghost." A cold dread sank into Maeva's stomach. He knew everything. "Why were you on my land?" he asked, his voice low. The moon petal, she rasped. "I was looking for a cure." A small, humorless smile flickered on his lips. "A human myth. There is no cure for the silver blight." "Then let me go," she said, her chin held high. "Let me return to my village and die. Your debt is paid. You brought me here. I am warm. I am clean. We are even." Jack Stormrider stalked to the bed, moving so swiftly that she flinched. He leaned in, planting his hands on the mattress on either side of her. His face was inches from hers. The sheer power radiating from him was intoxicating and suffocating. Even he whispered, his voice a dangerous growl. "You think this is a game. You think a warm bed repays the life of my son." The only heir to the Valyrius line, he was so close she could see the flecks of black in his golden eyes. She could smell the pine and ozone on his skin. "The debt is not even," he continued, his voice darkening, Not until I say it is. You saved my blood. Your life therefore belongs to me. He tapped a finger on her chest, his touch like a brand. Do not let my possessions die. Maeva's breath hitched. This wasn't a rescue. This wasn't a reward. So I'm a prisoner, she stated, her voice steady. You are a complication, he corrected, echoing Lila Hale's words. But you are my complication. You will stay in this room. You will eat what Lila Hale gives you. You will get strong, and you will not die. He pushed off the bed and strode to the door. What do you want from me, Your Majesty? Maeva called out, her voice laced with a sudden, desperate anger. He paused at the door, his back to her. I want to understand, he said, his voice oddly quiet. Why my son, who has been crying for his mother for 2 years, stopped crying the moment Lila Hale put one of your bloody bandages in his crib. He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. Rest, Maeva Cross, he said. Your new life has just begun. The door clicked shut behind him, and Maeva heard the unmistakable, heavy thud of an iron bolt sliding into place. She was, as she had suspected, in a gilded cage. The days blurred into a strange, suffocating routine. Maeva became a prize on display, a living, breathing testament to the Alpha King's generosity. Lila Hale visited 3 times a day, forcing pungent, supernaturally effective broths and tinctures down her throat. The silver blight didn't recede, but it was held at bay. The color returned to her cheeks and the strength to her limbs. The illness, however, remained a stubborn shadow in her blood, a fact that seemed to frustrate the old healer to no end. Maeva's only other visitor was a surprise. On the 3rd day, the heavy door opened, but it wasn't Lila Hale or Jack Storm Rider who entered. It was a small, silver-furred cub, Ash. His leg was bandaged, but he trotted into the room with absolute confidence. He navigated around the furniture, hopped onto the thick, bare pelt rug by the fire, and fixed her with his intelligent golden eyes. Hello there, Maeva whispered. The cub just watched her. She sat on the floor, tucking her knees to her chest. She didn't approach him. She just sat. And for the first time in days, she hummed. It was an old aimless tune her mother had taught her. The cub's ears perked. He crawled closer, his belly low to the ground, until he was close enough to sniff her bandaged hand. He nudged it. Then with a sigh, he curled up, placing his head on her foot. Within a minute, he was fast asleep. When Jack's Storm Rider entered the room an hour later, he stopped dead in the doorway. He said nothing. He simply watched his son, the heir to the kingdom, sleeping peacefully at the feet of a human outcast. He looked at Maeva, his expression a storm of confusion, and something else, something she couldn't name. Then he turned and left, leaving his son behind. It became their new routine. Ash would spend hours in her room, sleeping, playing with a loose thread on the rug, or just watching her. Maeva found his presence more healing than any of Lila Hale's medicines. Meanwhile, deep in the keep's laboratory, Lila Hale was furious. It makes no sense, she snapped, throwing a blood testing file onto her table. Rafe Wolfthorn, sent by the king for an update, didn't flinch. The tinctures should be purging the blight or killing her, Lila Hale muttered, staring at a slide of Maeva's blood under a microscope. But it's not. It's dormant, like a snake coiled waiting, so she's not getting better. Rafe Wolfthorn summarized. No, Lila Hale countered, agitated. Her body is strong, her lungs are clear, but the disease is still there, like a parasite or a shackle. And her reaction to the silver jacks, she should have died. A human with advanced silver blight touching pure silver. Her heart should have stopped, but it didn't. A low voice said from the doorway. Jack Storm Rider entered, his arms crossed. Explain, he demanded. I cannot, my king. Lila Hale admitted, a rare act for her. Her blood is an anomaly. It is not normal human blood. It is thick with the sickness. But beneath it... Do whatever you must, Jack Storm Rider ordered. Use the old ways. Lila Hale's head snapped up. My king, The old rites are forbidden. Blood scrying is dangerous, unpredictable. Do you think the council is not already demanding her head? Jax growled. She is a human in the heart of my keep, and I don't have a good reason for it. The life debt is wearing thin. I need answers, Lila Hale. I need to know what she is. The men stared at him, then nodded. As you command. That night, Lila Hale performed the old rite. She took the blood-stained bandage from the day Maiva was found, a drop of Jax's blood and a drop of ashes. She mixed them in a silver bowl and chanted the old words, the ones that predated the pacts. She came to Jax Stormrider's study at dawn, her face pale, her hands shaking. My king, she said, her voice trembling. Jax Stormrider was on his feet in an instant. What did you find Maeva Cross? She's not a random human, my king. Who is she descended from? Jax demanded. She's the last of the Lupina Umbra, Lila Hale whispered, as if saying the name aloud would curse them. Jax Stormrider's blood ran cold. That's impossible, Rhea Ashford muttered. They were hunted to extinction 5 centuries ago by my own ancestors. They were nothing but a myth. But their blood runs in her veins, Rhea insisted, holding up a small glass vial. Maeva Cross's blood, which had been a dull, murky red, now pulsed with a faint, amethyst-colored light deep within it. The Umbra were shadow healers, Rhea said, her voice filled with awe. They didn't just heal, they cured. They were the only beings who could neutralize silver poison. They could weave shadows. My ancestors, your ancestors, they feared them. They saw them as a threat to the shifter bloodlines. A cure for silver would destroy the werewolf's only weakness, Rhea continued, and they feared what that power could mean. The silver blight, Jax Stormrider, said, the pieces clicking into place. It's not a disease. No, Rhea confirmed, her eyes wide. It's a curse. A magical shackle designed by the first alphas to bind the Umbra bloodline, to suppress their magic, to make it slowly kill them from within. It's been passed down generation after generation, she added, until it became just another human illness. Jax Stormrider stared at the pulsing vial, the implications settling heavily in his chest. So when she touched the silver snare, it should have killed her, he said, realization dawning. But her dormant Umbra magic, the very magic designed to neutralize silver, must have reacted. It fought back. It's what saved Ash, Rhea said, and it's what's breaking the curse. The silver blight is being shattered, Jax, by the very poison that should have killed her. Jax grabbed the edge of his desk. The weight of the discovery hit him like a sledgehammer. The woman in his bed, the woman his son adored, wasn't just a dying human. She was an ancient dormant power. A power my own bloodline tried to exterminate, he said, his voice low and dangerous. This changes everything. The news of Maeva Cross's true nature, or at least the rumor of it, spread through the keep's inner circle like wildfire. Jax Stormrider had confined Rhea Ashford to her labs and doubled the guard on Maeva's room. But the damage had been done. The council, an uneasy mix of pack alphas and ancient elders, was already on edge. The king's human pet was now being whispered about as a sorceress and abomination. Jax needed to control the narrative, and he needed to do it fast. He called an emergency session of the High Council. The Great Hall was a terrifying place, built into the heart of the mountain, with a massive vaulted ceiling. A single enormous table made of petrified redwood dominated the room. The throne of stone sat at the head of the table. Alphas from all the vassal packs were present, their collective presence thickening the air with testosterone and aggression. At the head of the table sat Jax, and in the chair to his right, a seat of honor reserved for a guest or a prisoner, sat Maeva Cross. She was no longer dressed in her sickly torn silks. Instead, she wore a simple, elegant dress of forest green. Her health was returning, and the suppressed magic in her blood gave her an ethereal, almost luminous quality. Though terrified, she held her head high, her gaze steady. The first to speak was Talon Graves Alpha of the rival Silverest Mountains pack. He was a brute of a man with a silver-streaked beard and eyes like chips of ice. "Jax, we've tolerated this distraction," he boomed, dispensing with the formality of king. "You brought a human into our most sacred space. We held our tongues out of respect for your grief over the attack on your son, but this—" He gestured toward Maiva Cross. "The rumors, the whispers of Umbra blood. You are harboring a forbidden creature. She is a threat to our kind." "She is under my protection, Jax," said his voice a low, cold warning. "Protection." Talon Graves laughed a harsh, grating sound. "She is a weapon. They say her line could unmake us. She must be studied, handed over to the council for proper containment." His implication was clear torture. Maeva's hand clenched on the arm of her chair. Jax saw it. He saw her fear, but also the iron in her spine. This was the same woman who had touched Silver to save his son. Jax Stormrider needed to end this. He couldn't reveal Maeva's true nature. It would make her a target for every power-hungry alpha across the continent. But he could not give her up. The life debt was a convenient excuse, but the truth went deeper. The primal possessive instinct of the Alpha King had latched onto her. She was his. He stood to his full height, silencing the room. The power that radiated from him was like a crushing weight. "Lord Graves speaks of threats," Jax began, his voice echoing through the hall. "He is right. There is a threat. The poachers who entered my land, who set that trap, are still at large. My heir was almost taken from me." He paced behind his chair, his gaze sweeping over the assembled alphas. "My pack is wounded. My line was threatened. In times of instability, a king must shore up his defenses. He must forge new alliances. He must secure his future." He stopped directly behind Maeva's chair, his massive hands resting on her shoulders. Maiva jumped at the contact, the heat of his palms seeping through the fabric. Talon Graves narrowed his eyes. "What is the meaning of this, Jax?" Jax looked directly at Talon Graves, his golden eyes flashing with a predator's intensity. "The meaning, Lord Graves," he said, his voice deep and commanding, "is that you are not addressing a human pet. You are addressing the future queen of this kingdom." The room fell into stunned silence. You could hear a pin drop. Maeva's heart stopped. She turned her head to look up at him, her expression one of pure shock. This woman, Jax, continued, his grip on her shoulders, tightening in both protection and possession, "is not a prisoner. She is not a threat. She is my intended." Talon Graves's face went from smug to a deep apoplectic purple. Rafe Wolfthorn, standing guard by the door, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Maeva felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't protection. This was a political execution. A betrothal, Jax stated, his voice daring anyone to challenge him. A binding of her life to mine. She saved my blood, and now her blood will join with mine. She is under my direct protection as my mate-to-be. Any move against her is a move against me. Any word against her is treason. He looked down at Maeva, his golden eyes burning into hers with a silent, terrifying command. "Play along." "Is this not so, my love?" he asked, his voice laced with a silk-steel threat. Maeva, trapped in her thoughts, knew she had only one choice. She slowly, deliberately covered his hand on her shoulder with her own. "It is my king," she said, her voice shaking but clear. Talon Graves slammed his fist on the table. "This is a sham. You would mate with a human, a cursed one. You will address your future queen with respect." "Lord Graves," Jax snarled, "or I'll remove your tongue." The matter was settled. Jax grabbed Maeva's arm and pulled her to her feet. "The council is dismissed," he commanded. He dragged her from the hall, not waiting for the stunned alphas to recover. He dragged her through the stone corridors, his pace so fast she had to run to keep up. He didn't stop until they reached her chambers. The door slammed shut and bolted behind them. She ripped her arm from his grasp, her entire body shaking with rage. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice low and furious. "I just saved your life, Jax." Stormrider didn't flinch. His face was a mask of cold indifference. "You sacrificed it," she threw back at him. "You've made me a target for every single person in that hall. You've put a crown on my head so they have something to aim at. I put a shield around you." "Jax." Stormrider roared, his control snapping. He advanced on her, and for the first time she stood her ground. "Do you have any idea what Talon Graves would have done to you? He would have torn you apart piece by piece to find the secret to your magic. I did the only thing I could to legitimize you by lying, by claiming that in our world there is no difference." "Jax," Stormrider continued, his voice growing colder. "This is not my world, Jax." Maeva Cross screamed, using his name for the first time, shocking them both. "I was a dying woman in the woods. You turned me into a political pawn. I am not your intended. I am not your mate. And I will not be your queen." The silence in the room was electric. Jax Stormrider stared at her, his chest heaving with the defiance she'd shown. It was the same fire that had made her touch the silver. He found it. Breathtaking. "It is done," he said, his voice dropping to a low possessive rumble. "The declaration has been made. In the eyes of the council you are mine, whether you like it or not." "And what happens?" she whispered, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "When you get tired of your new toy." That he said, stepping so close that she was pinned between his body and the cold stone wall, is a problem for another day. He tilted her chin up with one finger. "You are not a toy, Maeva Cross. You are a queen. Start acting like one." The betrothal was a disaster. Talon Graves did not accept defeat gracefully. He retreated to his own lands, but his whispers of discontent found fertile ground. The kingdom was on edge, and Maeva was the focal point of its anxiety. She was no longer a prisoner, but she was never alone. Rafe Wolfthorn was her constant shadow, a grim-faced protector. Jax Stormrider was consumed with pack business, leaving Maeva to navigate a world of shifting hostile alliances. But something else was happening. The silver blight, the shackle, was finally and truly breaking. Her senses were sharpening. She could hear the heartbeats of the guards outside her door. She could smell the rain coming an hour before it arrived. And the shadows in her room seemed deeper, more welcoming. Sometimes she thought they moved for her. Her new, fragile peace shattered. One afternoon, exactly 1 month after her arrival, she was in the castle's small walled garden with Ash. The cub, now almost fully recovered, was her constant companion. He was chasing a butterfly, his silver fur bright in the sun. Ash Maeva laughed as he pounced and missed. Then a sudden, unnatural silence fell over the garden, the same silence she had felt in the woods. Talon Graves stepped out from behind a stone archway. He was not alone. 2 of his largest warriors flanked him. "Such a touching scene," Talon Graves sneered. "The human witch and the royal pup." "You are not welcome here, Lord Graves," Maeva said, her blood running cold. She subtly moved, putting herself between Talon Graves and Ash. "I am merely here for what is mine," Talon Graves said, his voice dripping with venom. "The king has a new toy," he spat the word, "but he's forgotten his true duties. He has left his heir vulnerable." Before Maeva could scream, one of Talon Graves's men lunged not for her, but for the cub. He scooped Ash up. The cub yelped and snapped, but the warrior's grip was like iron. "No," Maeva screamed, launching herself at the man. The second warrior backhanded her, sending her crashing to the stone path. Her head hit the ground with a sickening crack. "A foolish human gesture," Talon Graves said, looking down at her. "Tell Jax Stormrider, if he wants his heir, he can trade me the witch, the old silver mines at midnight," he added, his voice dripping with malice. He and his men were gone as quickly as they appeared. The garden was silent save for Maeva's ragged breaths. She pushed herself up, her vision swimming. "Ash," she whispered, frantic. "They took Ash. The silver mines. Midnight. Jack's Storm Rider's roar of fury was so powerful it rattled the stable beams. He didn't waste time on questions. He grabbed Maiva Cross, threw her onto his own massive warhorse, and mounted behind her. Rafe, he bellowed, to the mines, gather all guards. They rode as a pack, a wave of fury and steel thundering through the night. The old silver mines were a gaping wound in this mountainside, a place of death and decay. Talon Graves was waiting as promised. He stood at the mouth of the main tunnel, holding Ash by the scruff of his neck, a long, gleaming silver knife held to the cub's throat. "I knew you'd come," King Talon Graves mocked as Jack's Storm Rider and his guard fanned out. "A fair trade," he said. "The pup for the witch. Let my son go." Talon Graves. Jack's Storm Rider growled, dismounting. "I will give you a quick death. No deal." Talon Graves pressed the knife closer. Ash whimpered. "Give me the woman. She's the prize, and you know it. The Umbra blood. Give her to me and the pup lives." "Don't do it." Jax. Maeva whispered, her hand on his arm. Jack's Storm Rider was trapped. His kingdom, his son, his mate, everything was on the line. "She is not Umbra." Jack's Storm Rider lied. "Stop lying." Talon Graves screamed, his sanity slipping. "Give her to me." He was distracted. He was consumed by his greed for Maeva's power. He didn't see her slip off the horse. He didn't see her walking toward him. Her face was a mask of calm. Talon Graves. She said, her voice clear and carrying in the night. Maeva Jax shouted, "No. Get back." "You want me," Maeva said, stepping into the moonlight. "Here I am." Talon Graves' eyes lit up with triumph. "Yes. Yes. Come to me, little witch." "Let him go first," she said. "No, you first." Talon Graves sneered. Maeva looked at Ash, his terrified golden eyes fixed on her. She looked at Jack's Storm Rider, his face a portrait of agony. This was all her fault. This was the price of her life. "No more," she whispered to herself. She felt the silver blight, the shackle inside her. It was a cold, hard knot. She had been afraid of it. But now she was just angry. She reached inside herself to that knot of ancient suppressed power and pulled. It wasn't a scream. It was a release. Talon Graves' warriors. Jack's Storm Rider's guards. Talon Graves himself. They all cried out and fell to their knees as a wave of pure, tangible absence rolled out of Maeva Cross. It wasn't light. It wasn't sound. It was as if she had punched a hole in the world. The shadows around her boiled. They detached themselves from the trees, the rocks, and the mine entrance itself, swirling around her like a living cloak. The last of the silver blight dissolved not with a bang, but with a sigh. Her eyes, when she opened them, were no longer human gray. They were a deep, luminous amethyst. Talon Graves stared, his face a mask of terror. What are you?" he demanded. He raised the silver knife to strike Ash. No, Maeva said. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She simply stepped. She stepped into a shadow at her feet and emerged from the shadow behind Talon Graves. In the blink of an eye. The shadow step of the Umbra. Before Talon Graves could even turn, Maeva Cross placed her hand on his, not on his skin, but on the gleaming silver knife. The silver, so toxic to werewolves, so deadly to humans, met the touch of a true Umbra. It did not burn. It did not melt. It turned to black, harmless dust that scattered in the wind. Talon Graves stared at his empty hand, dumbfounded. In that brief second of hesitation, Maeva snatched Ash from his grasp, holding the cub tight against her chest. And in that same moment, Jack's Storm Rider struck. He was no longer a king. He was a wolf. He hit Talon Graves with the force of a freight train, and the two alphas tumbled into the darkness of the mine. The sounds that followed were brutal, wet, and sharp. Moments later, Jack's Storm Rider emerged covered in blood that was not his own. He paused, chest heaving, and looked at Maeva. She stood in a swirl of faint, violet-tinged shadows, holding his son. Her illness was gone, replaced by a vibrant, terrifying power. She was not a sick human. She was not a pawn. She was magnificent, and she was his. The return to the keep was silent. Jack's storm rider hadn't spoken a word since the fight. He had simply taken Ash from Maiva's arms, his gaze never leaving her face, and ridden them both back to the fortress. Maiva was taken to her rooms, but this time the guards at her door weren't there to keep her in. They were there to keep the rest of the world out. She stood on the balcony, overlooking the moonlit valley. The weakness, the cough, the constant cold she had lived with for years, it was gone. In its place was a thriving, vital energy that connected her to the night. The shadows in the corner of her room felt like old friends, a comforting blanket. The door opened. Jack's storm rider entered. He had cleaned up. The blood was gone. He wore a simple black tunic and he looked uncertain. The all-powerful Alpha King looked uncertain. He walked to the balcony and stood beside her, not touching. "Talon Graves is in the dungeons," he said, his voice low. "He will be exiled, stripped of his rank. He will not trouble you again." "Thank you," Maiva said softly. They stood in silence for a long time, the only sound the distant cry of a mountain hawk. "The betrothal," Maiva said finally, her voice steady. "It was a lie, a political move. You don't need it anymore. I can protect myself now. You are free to undo it." Jack's storm rider turned to face her. The moonlight caught the sharp planes of his face. It was, he admitted, his voice rough. It was a king's necessity, a king's instinct to claim what was valuable, to protect a strategic asset. Maiva Cross's heart sank, though she didn't know why she'd expected anything else. "I see." "No," he said, stepping closer. His golden eyes were intense, hypnotic. "You don't." That was the king speaking. But the male, the wolf, he had a different reason. He reached out and gently touched her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. His touch was not possessive. It was reverent. "The mate bond," he whispered, "is a rare thing for a royal. We are told to mate for power, for bloodlines. My first, it was a political match. It was empty." He looked down, a rare shadow of pain crossing his face. "When she died, I felt relief, and I've hated myself for it every day." He looked back at Maiva, his voice thick with emotion. "A true bond. I never thought I would have it. It's a pull, a recognition of the soul. And my soul," he said, "was blind. Jack Storm Rider. Oh, my wolf knew you the moment you touched my son." He continued, his voice raw. "It screamed at me, but I couldn't understand. Your scent was masked. Your blood was wrong. It was shackled. I thought I owed you a life debt. I thought I wanted to possess you. I called it 100 different things." He took her hands, her healed, smooth, powerful hands in his. "But when I saw you in the mines, when that power exploded from you, when you held my son, the shackle didn't just break on your magic, Maiva Cross. It broke on me. I saw you. Not the human, not the Umbra. I saw you. You are not my intended. Because I declared it." He said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are my mate because the moon goddess willed it. My declaration in the hall was a king's command. This is a male's plea." And then the impossible happened. Jack Storm Rider, the Alpha King of 3 continents, knelt. He went down on one knee, on the cold stone of the balcony, still holding her hands, and looked up at her. "My king." She gasped, trying to pull him up. "Jax," he corrected her. "Just Jax. I claimed you to save your life. I bound you to me with lies and politics." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "Now I am asking you to bind me." He looked up, his golden eyes raw and vulnerable. "You saved my son. You saved my kingdom. You broke a curse that my own ancestors created. You saved me from a life of duty without joy. Be my queen, Maiva Cross," he said, "not by my decree, but by your choice. Rule beside me. Be a mother to my son. Be my everything." Maiva Cross looked down at the most powerful man in the world, kneeling at her feet. She thought of the dying, hopeless woman in the woods. She thought of the small silver cub. She thought of the terror, the cage, the anger, and the strange, undeniable pull she had felt to this impossible, arrogant, fiercely protective man. She sank to her knees in front of him, so they were eye to eye. The shadows in the room crept forward, wrapping around them, both in a gentle protective embrace. "I was never a ghost, Jax," she whispered, touching his face. "I was just waiting." She leaned in and kissed him. It was not a kiss of command or submission, it was a kiss of equals, a kiss of fire and shadow. The Alpha King had found her bleeding, but the Umbra Queen had saved him whole. And so the outcast became a queen and the lonely king found his heart. But Talon Graves was still out there, and the other packs now knew that the Umbra bloodline had returned. The story of Jax Stormrider and Maeva Cross was far from over. It was just getting started.